Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. Today we are going to start off with verse 105, and I'm going to read the text between the lines and at the same time also translate the part that is read and explained. Goes off. ولا تكونوا كالذين تفرقوا واختلفوا من بعد ما جاءهم البينات فأولئك لهم عذاب عظيم يوم تبيض وجوه وتسود وجوه فأما الذين اسودت وجوههم أكفرتم بعد إيمانكم فذوقوا العذاب بما كنتم تكفرون وأما الذين ابيضت وجوههم ففي رحمة الله هم فيها خالدون. Do this and be not like those who became divided into sects and who differed after very clear guidance had come to them. And now it is they for whom there is an extremely grave punishment. So you can see, viewers, that clearly in the previous verse, which actually had ended by saying that "I'tasimu bihablillahi jamiyan," which means hold fast to the rope of God and be not divided. So this is in the background. These are the previous verses after which this section starts, and the believers are being told that they should not be like those who who divided themselves into sects, and this happened because they did not hold on to the rope of God that was sent to them, and that was, of course, the Torah. So the believers or the Ishmaelites who have now taken charge, they are told that as far as accepting the inevitable is concerned, they have to understand that if they also go astray and if they also don't hold fast to the rope of God, then their fate will be no different. So, لا تكونوا كالذين تفرقوا. Don't be like those people who were divided into sects, and once clear guidance had come to them, they still differed. So the guidance of the Torah had come to them very clearly, but in spite of holding on to the guidance of the Torah, they entangled themselves into various sideways and side paths and wandered off, and they were then guilty of going astray. So the Quran says that when this happens, وَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ, that for such people there is this great torment in the hereafter. And it is said that يَوْمَ تَبْيَضُّ وُجُوهُمْ وَتَسْوَدُّ وُجُوهٌ, that this torment will happen on the day when some faces will be bright and others on which darkness will be overspreading. So the darkened faces will be asked, did you once again become disbelievers after embracing faith? So hence taste now the punishment because of this disbelief of yours. So once the state or once the description of the day of judgment has been made by saying that for such people there will be a grave torment on that day, it is now as if the day of judgment has happened, and it's like being portrayed before people who are reading it, and they are being told that as far as those are concerned who will be righteous, who will be pious, their faces will be shining and bright, and there will be others whose faces will be darkened, and then they will be asked of kafartum ba'da imanikum, that you have turned to disbelief once you had accepted faith, so now fazuqul azaba bima kuntum takfurun, so now you have to taste this very, very painful punishment that is going to befall you. And so therefore they have to realize this in this world, because you see, once the day of judgment is portrayed before people in this manner, in such emphatic manner, the purpose is to tell them, the purpose is to warn them that they should try to avoid this fate, because they still have a chance, they still have life before them, they can still reflect on what the truth is, and at the same time realize that this is a great opportunity that has been afforded to them, because once they close their eyes and they are given death, they are put to sleep in the land of Barzakh, then of course nothing can be changed, nothing can be done, and they'll have to face this ignominy. And of course the opposite is also said, وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ بِيَضَّتْ وُجُوهُمْ فَفِي رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ, as for those whose faces will be bright, they shall abide in the shades of God's mercy, they shall remain there forever. So these are the people who received salvation, these are the people who attested to the prophethood of the prophets that came to them, and at the same time they are ones who wholeheartedly followed the message of the book of God. So as a result, they will be blessed with these bright faces, these faces which will be blossoming, they will be shining, and they will be jubilant and triumphant, and they will be proud that they have now gained victory, they have finally triumphed, they have finally received the favors of God. So, viewers, this is a very common portrayal that we see in the Quran, that whenever the day of judgment is referred to, we often find that the next verses describe this day as if it is happening now, as if it is right in front of our eyes. So the portrayal is وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ ابْيَضَّتْ وُجُوهُهُم. It's like saying that as for people whose faces will be white and shining, فَفِي رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ, they'll be in God's mercy, as if we can portray that mercy of God enveloping them, engulfing them, embracing them, and they are absolutely triumphant on what they have done. So this portrayal actually strikes, it strikes awe in our hearts. It also inspires us. It also motivates us that this is what the fate is going to be, and it is now our choice to be to land in the right path, to land in the right place, and at the same time do what is required of us to do. And then it is said, Hum fiha khalidun, that they are going to abide in it forever. So just as people who have denied their scriptures and their prophet, they are going to face eternal damnation, eternal hell. In a very similar way, it is said that people who abide in the mercy of God, people whose faces are bright, they attested to their messengers, they accepted the guidance of their books. So now they are in the shade of God's mercy, and they will live in that mercy forever and forever. تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وما الله يريد ظلما للعالمين ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور. These are the revelations of God which we are reciting to you with all truth, and reciting to you because God does not desire to do any injustice to mankind. So, like these people of the book do not remain in false hopes, and remember that all the heavens and the earth contain belongs to God only, and all affairs are presented before God alone. So if we have to understand, as far as these verses are concerned, that they clearly tell us that whatever is being told to us, tilka ayatullah natluha alayka bil haqq, that these verses are being recited before the prophet, as the truth, as absolute guidance that has come to him, and of course through him, all his followers. وَمَا اللَّهُ يُرِيدُ ظُلْمًا لِلْعَالَمِينَ, and because God does not desire to do any injustice to mankind. He would like to give full opportunity, he would like to give full respite to people for whatever they can do, and either they gain God's mercy or they earn his wrath. So both are these opportunities, and God does not want to be unjust to the people of the world, so he gives maximum benefit of the doubt, and at the same time also provides them the full opportunity to reflect and profess faith. And they have to remember وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ, that all that the heavens and the earth contain, it belongs to God. So everything which is within this universe, it belongs to God. He is the owner, he is the master, and everything is going to return to him. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ is actually also a warning, and at the same time an assurance. So when things are going to return to him, he is going to check them, he is going to vet them, he is going to evaluate them, and then decide. So it's like saying that, well, everything that God has created is going to have a culmination. And that culmination, of course, is the day of judgment. It is that day on which each one of us would be held accountable, and therefore it is in the fitness of things that we keep it in mind. كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر ولو آمن وتؤمنون بالله ولو آمن أهل الكتاب لكان خيرا لهم منهم المؤمنون وأكثرهم الفاسقون لن يضروكم إلا أذى وإن يقاتلوكم يولوكم الأدبار ثم لا ينصرون. Believers, with the blessings of God at this time, you are an excellent group, raised up to bear witness to the truth before people. You urge towards virtue, forbid vice, and have true belief in God. And had these people of the book also professed faith in the Quran, it would have been better for them. Undoubtedly, some among them are believers also. But alas, most among them are disobedient. So again, this is something of a warning which is sounded to the Ishmaelites, and at the same time an assurance given to them. These are glad tidings that at this time, when they are succeeding the people of the book, they are an excellent community. They are people who with regard to their faith, and their deeds are exemplary. And so now their enemies cannot harm them. The Almighty's law is no different for the Israelites, but they earned the everlasting wrath of God because of their defiance in various matters. Obviously, there is also a warning for the Ishmaelites here that the position of leadership that has been bestowed upon them is not because of race or creed, but because of adhering to the truth, both in their beliefs and in their deeds. So the position is conditional to certain circumstances and characteristics. They must adhere to, and certain responsibilities that that are imposed on them, they must discharge. And if they fulfill these responsibilities, they will remain on this position of leadership. And if they evade them, they too will be meeting the same fate as the people of the book. So this verse, viewers, you can see it occurs almost halfway down the surah, and a very similar verse similarly had occurred in the previous surah, which is the counterpart of the surah Baqarah, and we had a very similar verse there also, and that too almost halfway down. And the verse that was stated in Surah Baqarah was is of course the Shahadat verse, which gave the responsibility of bearing witness to the people, to the Ishmaelites. They were told that كَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا, that in a similar manner God has made you a medium community, a community who is in the middle. On one side are God and His Messenger who have borne the truth to them, and on the other side is the rest of mankind. So just as after deposing the Jews, which were mainly discussed in the previous surah, in Surah Baqarah, we had this verse which announced that now the new ummah is taking their place, and they are now being told of their responsibilities in a very similar way, because these two semblance, that in that surah the Jews were basically addressed, and then once the truth had been unveiled to them, once their charge sheet had been presented to them, they were deposed, and then the announcement of a new ummah was given and made. And in a very similar way, this has occurred here too, and because here the addressees are the Christians or the Nazarenes. So the addressees in Baqarah were the Jews, and in Al Imran are the Nazarenes, and in both these surahs, near the half of that surah, we find similar verses occurring in which this new ummah is announced. And it is right here that this announcement is made in this surah: kuntum khayra ummatin ukhriyat lin-nas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar wa tu'minuna billah, which means that the responsibilities that they have is to enjoin what is good, forbid what is evil, and also it is stated that you are people who truly believe in God, and that is why you have been given this responsibility. And then there is this yearning expressed in the next part of this verse: وَلَوْ آمَنَ أَهْلُ الْكِتَابِ لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ. Had these people of the book also professed faith in the Quran, some among it would have been better for them. لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ. So it's like saying that these people of the book are being deposed from their position of leadership, and had they professed faith in the Quran, it would have been better for them. But then there is also a rejoinder which is given at the end, and it is said that some among them are believers, minhumul mu'minun wa aktharuhumul fasiqun, but a majority of them are those who are defiant, who are disobedient. So we can also see from here that a small portion, even if it was a small portion of the people of the book, they were the ones who awaited the arrival of a new prophet, because it was promised in their scriptures. So they did profess faith. They did accept Muhammad as the last prophet, and they proudly felt that they are the ones who have been given this chance to actually profess faith in two prophets of God. One which was, of course, sent as Moses in the case of the Jews, and in the case of the Christians, of course, they were required to follow what Jesus was had actually conveyed to them. And he had said that he has not come to revoke the law, he's not come to revoke the Torah, but to complete them. So it was like following both these books and these messengers. And now they were given this opportunity to profess faith in Muhammad, peace be upon him. And it was their good luck that they had been given this opportunity. But as the Quran has expressed this yearning, that most of them are ones who turned out as disbelievers. And then it is said, لَن يَضُرُّكُمْ إِلَّا أَذًى وَإِن يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ يُوَلُّكُمُ الْأَدْبَارَ ثُمَّ لَا يُنصَرُونَ. ثُمَّ لَا يُنصَرُونَ. So it is said that They can cause you a slight hurt. Apart from this, they certainly cannot harm you. لن يضركم إلا أذى وإن يقاتلوكم يولوكم الأدبار. And rest assured, if they fight against you, they shall definitely turn their backs. Then they shall not receive any help from anywhere. The important thing that has to be realized here, that it is here that we have to understand that as far as the believers are concerned, they are sounded this assurance. They are given this assurance that they might cause you some harm, but that will only be temporary. And then if they fight and they try to fight you in battle, they will just turn their backs. So malayun sarun, and then no one will be there to help them. ضربت عليهم الذلة أينما ثقفوا إلا بحبل من الله وحبل من الناس وباءوا بغضب من الله وضربت عليهم المسكنة ذلك بأنهم كانوا يكفرون بآيات الله ويقتلون الأنبياء بغير حق ذلك بما عصوا وكانوا يعتدون. So it is next said that ignominy shall be stamped upon them wherever they are seen, except if they hold on to the rope of God and the rope of those who have held the rope of God. They have returned with the wrath of God, and cowardice has been stamped upon them. This is because they have been denying God's revelations and have been slaying His prophets unjustly, because they were disobedient and have always been crossing the limits. So once again, they are being told that as far as they are concerned, they are going to be disgraced, and unless, of course, they profess faith, they will have this continuous faith of being disgraced and humiliated. And the only exception is what the Quran says, "Illa bihabli minallahi wa habli minan nas." If except they hold on to the rope of God, or to those people who have held the rope of God, which means either they hold fast to this book that has been revealed to them, the Quran, or as it says, people who have actually held fast to this rope, people who are adhering to this rope of God, are, and that is the only exception, that if they are able to do so, then they will be saved. وَبَاءُوا بِغَضَبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ, and they have returned with the wrath of God, and cowardice has been stamped upon them. And then the reason for this ignominy is actually stated here, and that is that as far as they are concerned, they are guilty of denying God's revelations. They are guilty of denying God's revelations and have been slaying His prophets unjustly, because they were disobedient and have always been crossing the limits. So denying God's revelation, this is a theme that we have been discussing even earlier on in our previous sections of this verse. We know that as far as the Quran is concerned, it has given this charge sheet. It has told them that as far as they are concerned, it is not because of any misunderstanding, any lack of information, any or misinformation that they are denying a prophet of God. The Quran says that they are denying the revelations of min ba'di ma arafu, which means that they have understood them correctly. Min ba'di ma tabayyana lahumul haqq, after the truth had become evident to them. They were fully convinced of the truth, and they still did not give up. And we have been discussing that it was their arrogance, it was their jealousy that did not allow them to accept what they were convinced in their hearts. And that is why the wrath of God actually overtook them, and they were severely promised doom in this world and the next. And then it is said that they were also guilty of slaying unjustly prophets of God. So we know John and Zachariah, of course, his father, both were mercilessly killed as a result of their own arrogance. And we know that they were given this punishment in a very, very humiliating way. And this guilt that did not actually compunct them in any way. They felt no compunction. They had no remorse, and they became audacious on this crime. This is something which made God very angry, and rightly so, because when you do so, then you lose any form of mercy that God might have felt for them. And that is why the Quran says, ذَلِكَ بِمَا عَصَوْا وَكَانُوا يَعْتَدُونَ, because they were disobedient and have always been crossing the limits. So I'm going to pause here for some time, and if you have any questions on what we have studied thus far, please raise them, and then we'll inshallah go after that.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. Uh, Imran, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad, for valuable information. My first question is on the ayah 3:111, لَن يَضُرُّكُمْ إِلَّا إِذَا, or other, like وَإِن يُقَاتِلُكُمْ يُوَلُّكُمُ الْأَدْبَارَ. They cannot harm you except a little bit of pain or annoyance whenever you fight with them, that they're not going to be helped.
They turn their backs. Yeah.
Right. So my question is that how come Muslims? I mean, if this is a prediction, we see Muslims getting slaughtered everywhere. That's this ayah, and then the next ayah. I'll let you, because I wanted to know when it says "Hablum min nas." How do we know what is an-nas referring to?
So first you have to understand that this has a very specific context. It's not referring to all Muslims and all the people of the book. This is referring to the people of the book of the times of the Prophet, on whom the truth had been conclusively conveyed. And it is about them that it is said, Zuribat alayhimu zillatu wal maskana, and it is about them that it is said that they will not be able to harm you except hurt you a little bit. So it's not a prediction, it's not something for the future. It was meant right at that time that these people who are now being deprived of God's mercy, if they fight you, they'll turn their backs, and if ever some harm is going to come to you, that's going to be very temporary. So this is exactly in accordance with the law of Itmamul Hujjah, the law of messengerhood, the law of prophethood that we have been discussing, that the Quran describes this law every now and then. And if you don't have recourse to that law, you are bound to end up in a misinterpretation of these verses, as many interpreters have. If you look at some of the commentaries, you will find that as we go along in Surah Al-Imran, there are certain promises which are being made. And for example, it is said that believers are destined to prevail on the disbelievers, and it is said, as you've just seen, that no harm will come to them except a small hurt. So they tend to generalize this, and they think that, well, this is going to happen. And when they see that it's not happening, then they are at loss how to reconcile with this passage of the Quran and with the current situation of the Muslim Ummah. So that has to be very clear that this is speaking about this is a story, this is a telltale about the Prophet and his mission in the times of the revelation of the Quran. And the Prophet is being assured. So remember, they are being given this assurance, kuntum khayra ummatin, that you are the best community. So even this sentence is not understood. And when it is said that you are the best community, and then we see people, doing the exact opposite, so how can we call the best community? So remember, this best community is a label that was given to the Sahaba, to the Ishmaelites of those times. So all these verses that we are studying, they have this very, very gripping and strong context. We just cannot sever it from the context. If you do it, as I said, then all sorts of misinterpretation will result, and you will not be able to reconcile the actual situation with the Quranic verses. So as far as your second question is concerned, illa bihablim minallah. So hablim minallah is something which we very well know that it is God's rope, and that is, of course, the message of God, scripture of God. And unless they profess faith in that, as the Quran says, Zuribat alayhimu zillah, that this humiliation is going to be stamped on their faces. The second part is hablim minan nas, which means the rope of those or those people who have held on to the rope of God. So it's like saying, it is, if anything can save them, it is either the Quran or the people who are following the Quran.
So, okay, so it basically is hablum minal mu'minin or alladhina amanu. So the question is, so these people can be saved by having a treaty with the Muslims, or by basically holding fast to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala themselves.
Yes, it's not any. Of course, the hablu min al-nas part is something in which you are having some covenant with people who have this have a different view. But as far as hablu min Allah is concerned, that is the Quran. So either the Quran is going to save them, or anything which is binding commitment that is being made. So that could be one interpretation as well.
And this is specifically targeting or being addressed. The addressee here are also Christian, like you said in this particular surah. Anyway, the Christian are addressed, or is it general to?
I mean, it is the people of the book. It is mostly the people of the book. Yes, as we move on in the surah, there are certain specific verses, but here you'll find that the word zillah, aynama sukifu, is the word zillah is often spoken of the Jews, that ignominy was stamped on them. So it's not just the Christians. Basically, so you remember in the Quran treats the Jews and the Christians to be very, very close confidants and very, very close sects of one another, because in the view of the Quran, I mean, Christians were actually, I mean, followers of Moses also, because Moses had declared and Jesus had declared that he had not come to revoke the Torah. So the Sharia that they were supposed to follow was the Sharia of the Torah. It was only Paul in his own times who revoked this Sharia. So the first generation followers of Jesus, they were very, very strict followers of Torah. It was only when Paul repealed these laws and he said that the Torah is not meant for non-Jews that all this happened. And we now have a new community that sprung up. Otherwise, I mean, there was no difference between them. I mean, the Jews, as the first generation Jews, that is why it is said that Jesus is the last Jewish prophet. So he himself is regarded to be a Jew. So it's just that because of the fact that Paul revoked the Torah, the Sharia, that a new community came into being.
Thank you very much. Jazakumullah khair.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. Dr. Muhammad Asif, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yes, this pertains to verse 103, where it has been directed that وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. And in the subsequent verse, in order to achieve this i'tisam billah, it has been directed وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةً يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. So, how to achieve and how to hold this rope of God that we have in the form of message from God. Quran directs, as you said, that there should be a group who should be dedicated for these three aspects, that yad'una ila al-khair, ya'murun bil ma'ruf wa yanhaun 'anil munkar. And then subsequently it is said, wala takunu kallazina tafarraqu. So this is the context. In the context,
Yes.
I am going to ask my two questions. First question is that, because in light of this ayah, Quran, this divine book serves as a shared foundation for the followers, and it fosters unity and shared values among the believers at that time, the companions. But we see, and just subsequently we see Quran directs وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا. But we see after the demise of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there were differences among the companions of the Prophet, and there were bloodsheds, even bloodsheds, on the issues like who will be the next caliph, and the three caliphs that were martyred by the fellow Muslims. There were bloodsheds and wars even between Hazrat Aisha and Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhum on the issue of caliphate. This all happened despite the fact that we have the directions from the Holy Book regarding to hold the rope of God, i'tisam billah, and how to achieve this i'tisam billah. Three directions were given. يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ يَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. My second question, Ektar, how did it happen that in such directions, and then again لَا تَفَرَّقُوا, but still all such happened? And then what were those?
Let's take one question at a time. Let us take one
established. Yes.
Dr. Muhammad Asif, please, we cannot go on with so many questions. If you can just stick to one question that is pertaining to Surah Al Imran.
Yes.
Dr. Saleem.
So I just want to ask then how this was materialized. Ya'murun bil ma'ruf yanhaun anil munkar in the era of the Prophet and after the Prophet, and how such happened after his demise. Actually, this is my first question.
Thank you for that.
So Actually, we have to understand that people who were the followers of the Prophet of God, they were all holding fast to the rope of God. It's just the interpretation of a certain situation that made them differ. So remember, if you look at history, I mean, all of them were devout Muslims. All of them were very, very strong followers of the Quran. So that particular skirmish that you are referring to, like the Battle of the Camel or the Battle of Siffin that occurred in the first 30 or 40 years of the Prophet's demise, those were battles which were fought not because the people had gone away from the Quran, but because they had a different opinion regarding certain interpretations of the Quran. So you see, I think it's in spite of the fact that it did cause bloodshed after the Prophet had gone away. The fact is that each of the groups, they stuck to what they think was their own interpretation of the Quran, and they very sincerely thought it was their interpretation, and they thought that it was a responsibility to go as far as to lay down their lives to protect that. So I see it from a different angle. So you see, I mean, one thing is that you differ in the Book of God. That is not what happened in their cases. And that is actually what has happened much later after them, that people stopped having recourse to the Book of God. They went into folklore, they went into historical narratives, they went into cultural things, they went into inauthentic narratives. If you pick up the book of Ghazali, for example, Ihya Ulumuddin, we've discussed this a number of times, you'll find that a lot of concocted and weak narratives are cited in that book, and that is virtually the Bible of the Muslim Ummah today. So basically, this "La takunu kallazina tafarraqu," in which we have become sects, is something of a manifestation that took place much later. I'll explain once again what happened in the time of the Prophet, but actually, the manifestation of what is being said here or predicted here is what has happened much later in the Ummah, in which every group tried to, interpret the Quran not through the Quran directly or to understand the Quran in a way that the Quran should have become a central part of their lives. If you look at the history, you'll find that Quran was seldom used as a means of guidance, and we had our own jurists who had their own interpretations, and then we had extremist groups, and then of course we had our hadiths and historical narratives which were absolutely weak. So if you look at our educational system after the third century, you'll find that the system actually was a stagnated system in which the Quran never occupied the central place that it was deemed that it should have. So this tafriqa, as the Quran has spelled out, is happened much later, and the result of, it was a result of not adhering to the Book of God, not directly interpreting and connecting ourselves with the Book of God, but to weak narratives and to historical incidents and to folklore and myth. So that is what I understand from this verse. As far as what happened, as I said earlier on very briefly, right after the demise of the Prophet, so that was basically a lot of political issues that had come into them. So for example, the followers of Ali, they thought that they have been divinely given the right to succeed the Prophet, and in the Ghadir Khum khutbah, we all know that they think that the Prophet had appointed Ali as his successor, whereas of course, the opposite party had a different interpretation. So it was more of interpretive thing in the light of what we have seen that happened. So it was not because the Quran was not adhered to, it was because of certain interpretive differences outside of the Quran. Yes, they were political, to some extent also religious, and that is where the whole issue actually became a bubble, and it burst forth in the first 30 or 40 years. So that is my understanding of history, and anyone can differ from that.
Yeah, and one more question
And,
regarding this.
Dr. Asif, if we could just ask our question maybe later, reserved for later, because I want to give other people a chance who have their hands up.
Okay.
I'll come back to you later. Ruhi Rasool, if you can please unmute your mic and ask your question. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam.
Sir, my question is about the human faces, the significance given to the human faces while they taste their actions on the day of judgment. They are darkened and they are brightened on that day because of their actions in this world. So why this so much significance is given on the faces only?
You see, our faces
Human faces.
is it is an expression of our inner mood. So when we are bright and cheerful, it means that we are happy. And when the faces they look gloomy and dark, it means that there is something wrong with us. So it's just a portrayal of our inner selves. So when the Quran is actually depicting our faces and telling them that some of them will be bright and shining, the other one will be gloomy and dark, it only tells us that basically this is how they will feel from inside, that they are now doomed forever, and others will feel that they are now blessed forever. So it's like just telling us that our faces will depict our inner emotions.
So, any other body part or the whole body
No, it's
is
not.
not included in
That
it.
is because you see, in our lives also, it is our facial expression that is the most vibrant, that is the most telling feature of how we feel inside. I mean, it is our face, it is our eyes, it is our forehead, the way we look. That is the most prominent thing. I mean, the other any other limb is not as prominent, even if it is, it's not as prominent. The face is the most prominent feature, which actually expresses what we are from inside or what we feel from inside.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. We have no more questions at this time. You can continue with the session.
So, ليسوا سواء من أهل الكتاب أمة قائمة يتلون آيات الله آناء الليل وهم يسجدون يؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويسارعون في الخيرات وأولئك من الصالحين وما يفعلوا من خير فلن يكفروه والله عليم بالمتقين. Now, this is a passage, dear viewers and everyone who's listening in. These three verses are extremely important because this is one place in the Quran. Yes, there are other places as well, in which the Quran is full of praise for the people of the book who had accepted faith. So remember, yes, there are, abounding instances in the Quran in which people of the book are condemned. I mean, right in this surah and the previous surah, we have found so many passages in which their charge sheet is read out to them, and they are told that this is the reason that they are being punished. These three verses actually tell us that amongst the people of the book, there are people who are different, who have professed faith, who are waiting for the last prophet to arrive, and they were anxiously waiting. And as soon as he arrived, they professed faith in him, and they started to follow him. And now look at what is being said. The first thing is, it should remain clear that all people of the book are not alike. This is what is stated first. Laysu sawa. Sawa means equal. Laysu means not. So not everyone is equal. Min ahlil kitab ummatun qa'imatun yatluna ayatillahi ana al-layl, which means that there is one group among them which is abiding by its promise. Ummatun qa'imatun yatluna ayatillah, and they are ones who are qa'ima. Qa'ima means, of course, they are the promise they had made with themselves, that whenever the last prophet would come, they will profess faith in him. That is what is said here. Ummatun qa'ima. It is qa'ima on the misaq, or the covenant that was taken from them. Ummatun qa'imatun alal misaq. Yatluna ayatillahi ana al-layl. They are the ones who recite the book by night, ana al-layl, wa hum yasjudun, and they remain in prostration before him. So referring to the tahajjud prayer, referring to the night prayer. So these are the people who have accepted faith, and now they have become so devout that they recite the Quran by night and prostrate before the Almighty at night. And then it is said, يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. They truly believe in God in the last day. They urge towards virtue and forbid vice. يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. Exactly the same thing that we have studied earlier on as a duty that was to be professed by people who are at the helm of affairs, people who are commoners, all of them. So in a similar way, it is said that now that they have joined the Muslims, they also share the same duties. يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And then it is said, وَيُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. And it is said that as far as they are concerned, they take lead. They take lead in good deeds. وَيُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. So one thing that you might also need to note here is, which I often make it as a point, that remember there are words for people, most of you who understand the Urdu language, especially for you, that remember there are words in languages that might be the same, but they have different meanings. And this is a typical example here, the word khairat. So we know in the Urdu language, the word khairat actually means charity. But it's not the same in the Arabic language. In the Arabic language, the word khairat means any good deed, all good deeds, even helping people, even praying to the Almighty, even giving zakah, even fasting. So it's khairat has a very wide meaning in the Arabic language. But in the Urdu language, it has confined itself just to charity. So this is like something that you must note, that there are words, there are several words, and I've been discussing them as well, that they are the same, but they have different meanings. And technically they are called false cognates. So cognate is a word in language which occurs in more than one language. And when we say that it's a false cognate, it would mean that it would have a different meaning when it transfers to a different language. So in Arabic it was much broad, but it got confined, very confined, as soon as it reached the Urdu language. So وَيُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ, it's not just that they do good deeds. The important thing to note here is even more inspiring, and that is they take lead. They compete with one another in good deeds, and that is what the spirit is, dear viewers. The Quran has mentioned this elsewhere also, that if there is to be some competition, if there is to be some sort of duel, so to speak, it has to be amongst good deeds. You cannot vie with one another regarding naturally given talents. For example, if someone can speak very well, someone can write very well, and he or she is naturally gifted. So there are certain talents that are naturally found in a person, and they are talents that you cannot emulate in any way, because a person might be given those talents in a very pronounced way. But the Almighty has made this amply clear in so many places in the Quran, that there's one area, there's one sphere in which everyone has equal ability, everyone, and that is to do good deeds. Yusari'una fil khairat, not only to do good deeds, but to outdo one another in good deeds. So whether a person is educated, whether a person is not educated, whether a person is an Einstein, or whether a person is totally unlettered, that all these people, every person on the planet Earth has been given an equal opportunity to be a righteous person. And that is why we can clearly see that the status of Sabiqun, which is the highest rank in Jannah, the highest rank in paradise, can be attained by anyone. It's not just that people who are very scholarly, or people who are very well educated, or people who have several talents can end up in paradise, the highest state of paradise. Anyone who is a righteous person, anyone who is a good person, whatever he might be professionally or otherwise, that is a sphere in which the Almighty says. In fact, at one place it says, وَفِي ذَلِكَ فَلْيَتَنَافَسِ الْمُتَنَافِسُونَ. It is in this sphere that people who would like to compete should compete. If there is to be a competition between people, it has to be who is more pious, who is more righteous, who can outdo other people in doing good deeds. And it is here that the Quran has actually praised the people of the book in such a beautiful way, that yusari'una fil khairat, they are the ones who were waiting for the last prophet, and now that the last prophet has arrived, they leapt towards him, they accepted faith, they prostrated before God all night in gratitude that thank God we were there to welcome him. And the Quran says they joined, they shared the duty of ya'muruna bil ma'ruf and yanhauna al munkar, of enjoining good and forbidding evil with the believers, and they became part of them. And then the Quran has given these glad tidings to them. وَأُولَٰئِكَ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ وَأُولَٰئِكَ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, and they are amongst the pious servants of God. And then another beautiful thing is said, وَمَا يَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَلَنْ يُكْفَرُوهُ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِالْمُتَّقِينَ. So the word kafaru is used transitively generally towards two objects. And here it encompasses the meaning of deprivation, in some deprivation. So that is why Ustaz has translated this portion as, no doubt that they are true seekers of the truth, and as a reward of their attitude of theirs, whatever good deed they do, its reward shall not be denied to them. They shall not be deprived of that good deed. So فَلَنْ يُكْفَرُوهُ here does not, it's not, it does not occur in the classical sense that we are often used to. It's not kafara. It's in the sense that they would not be deprived, they will be not denied their reward. Wallahu alimun bil muttaqin, and God very well knows the virtuous. So the implication is that though these people of the book have yet to profess faith, among them are true believers, and hence each and every good deed done by them will be rewarded. So the Almighty does not deprive people of the reward of good deeds except those who deliberately deny the truth. And that is precisely what is stated here. And then it is said, إن الذين كفروا لن تغني عنهم أموالهم ولا أولادهم من الله شيئا وأولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. On the other hand, those who have decided to remain disbelievers, neither their wealth nor their children shall be of any benefit to them before God, and they are the companions of the fire. There they shall remain forever. So, the wealth and children, which are a means of making a person indifferent to the Almighty and to His teachings, is the wealth and children which is implied here. It's not that it is said that every form of wealth or all children are the ones who take a person away from the remembrance of God. No. Yes, when a person gets entangled in the race for wealth and to acquire anything for the benefit of his children, even if it be something that is acquired through illegal means or through means which are unlawful, and he is so engrossed in their wealth, in their love, that he would tread any path to achieve glory. It is here that the Quran says that for such people, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَن تُغْنِيَ عَنْهُمْ أَمْوَالُهُمْ وَلَا أَوْلَادُهُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ شَيْئًا, neither their wealth nor their children, because you see, in this world, it is wealth and children that we feel who are our greatest source of help, and of course they are ones who are protecting us, so to speak. But God says this is not going to happen for those who end up in kufr. وَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ, and they are the companions of fire. وَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ, and then it is said, هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ, they shall remain there forever. One thing that you might need to note here, viewers, is that we often come across this phrase, hum fiha khalidun, both for paradise and both for hell, which means that they'll abide eternally in paradise, and then it is said they'll abide eternally in hell. So remember, it's not that every single person who's going to go to hell is going to abide forever in hell. This eternal damnation or eternal hell is promised to people who deny God's prophets intentionally. So because of the fact that the Quran is dealing here, especially in these two surahs, with people right in front of the Quran who are people who actually deliberately, intentionally, willfully, purposefully denied, even if they were convinced. So this punishment, this sin entails the punishment of eternal damnation. So remember, if a person does not intentionally deny a prophet, but his good deeds are less than his bad deeds, and the bad deeds there abound, so then he would receive a punishment that is commensurate with the sins that he did, and he might be taken out. So that's something of a different category. But because of the fact that that category is almost never discussed, yes, very slightly discussed in the Quran, so we might draw this wrong conclusion that for every person who enters hell, he will stay there eternally. That is not what the Quran is saying. But because the Quran is often dealing with people who are denying God's prophets intentionally, and since for them this punishment is a given, so we have to make this distinction. Otherwise, we'll think that every single person is going to remain in hell forever. So, مثل ما ينفقون في هذه الحياة الدنيا كمثل ريح فيها سر أصابت حرث قوم ظلموا أنفسهم فأهلكت وما ظلمهم الله ولكن أنفسهم يظلمون. In the life of this world, whatever they spend apparently in the way of God is like a freezing wind that smites the crop fields of men who have been unjust to themselves and ruins it. They deserve only this treatment, and in reality, God has not done any injustice to them. In fact, they have continued to be unjust to their own souls. So this is a very rampant and a very repetitive theme in the Quran. The Quran is often given this example that as far as bad deeds are concerned, even if they are done in a way that you are professing, you are deliberately denying a prophet of God, these evil deeds, they are not going to have any impact as far as the mercy of God is concerned. God is not going to be merciful to such people. Yes, of course, people who might have faltered, people who might have misunderstood, mercy is for such people, but not for people who have become arrogant. And the example is given is exactly of such people, that it's like a freezing wind that smites the crop field of men who have been unjust to themselves and ruins it. So just as a cold wind, just as a freezing wind is going to just destroy the crop that it fires through, that is something which has to be understood. And also to be noted is the fact that if you see and look up the Quran, the parables, the similes, the examples that have been given in the Quran are often from country life, often from crops, often from things that we observe if we live in the countryside. So because the Arabs were used to these things, they were very fond of cultivation. Of course, we know that animal husbandry was also there. So you will often find these examples abounding in the Quran. And this again is something that we have to understand, that the Quran has a very specific context. When it talks about people who are right in front of them, it will deal and always give examples from their environment, from their surroundings. It just cannot go outside. And in this way, we have to understand that, of course, this will change when surroundings change. So that is why it is said, وَمَا ظَلَمَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَلَكِنْ أَنفُسَهُمْ يَظْلِمُونَ. God does not do injustice to them. It is they who have been unjust to their own souls. This is a theme of the Quran which is very recurrent, that it is not that God is doing something, He is not being unjust to them. They have earned His wrath. They are people about whom we know that they cannot in any way survive and they don't deserve His mercy. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا بطانة من دونكم لا يألونكم خبالا ودوا ما عنتم قد بدت البغضاء من أفواههم وما تخفي صدورهم أكبر قد بينا لكم الآيات إن كنتم تعقلون. Believers, they are not your friends, so do not make those outside your own people your confidants. They will spare no opportunity to harm you. They will spare no opportunity to harm you. لا يألونكم خبالا. And then it is said, وَدُّوا مَا عَنِتُّمْ. They desire hardships for you, and their enmity is evident from their mouths, and greater is what their chests conceal. We have made evident to you these signs if you are sensible enough. قَدْ بَيَّنَّا لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ إِن كُنْتُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. So again, we can see that this is something which the common Muslims are especially told, because they are either very simpletons or they are not able to understand the schemes devised by the people of the book. So they have to be on guard. See, this word bitana is a very interesting word. The word bitana actually means someone who is our close friend, someone who is our associate, someone who is our confidant. So the Quran is saying that don't make these people as your confidants. Don't make them your friends, because they are out to ruin you. They will spare no opportunity to harm you. Again, this has a very specific context. And as I just said earlier on, if you don't look at this verse by actually giving full regard to the context, you'll end up doing something which is absolutely against the purport of the Quran, and you'll end up hating the people of the book of today, or not making friends with them today, by not understanding that, again, this is a specific category of the people of the book who were right there, who were deliberately denying the Prophet of God, and because they were there to harm the Muslims. So it is said that don't make any confidants, because if you are going to make them confidants and reveal what you have planned, then of course that's going to be totally, there's going to be a very, very disastrous situation. And then it is said that قَدْ بَدَتِ الْبَغْضَاءُ مِنْ أَفْوَاهِهِمْ وَمَا تُخْفِي صُدُورُهُمْ أَكْبَرُ, which means that what they say from their mouths is, it is also filthy and dirty, but what they hide is dirtier, is filthier, which means that what they are from inside is entirely a different story. They're even more harsh, even more stern, and even more, hateful in their approach towards Muslims. So you cannot trust them. So this is like a warning sounded to the simpletons amongst Muslims. Of course, we have simpletons everywhere. So they are being told that don't get lured, don't be overawed by some of their ways that you might think they are doing it for your own favor, because that's not what they are doing. They are hiding something which is very evil in their own hearts. And it says, Ha antum ulai tuhibbunahum wa la yuhibbunakum wa tu'minuna bil kitabi kullih wa iza lakukum qalu amanna wa iza khalaw adhu alaykum al anamila min al ghayz kul mutu bi ghayzikum inna allaha alimun bi zatis sudur. It is you who want to befriend them while they do not want to befriend you. So see, this is how the simpletons amongst the Muslims are behaving. The Quran says, Ha antum ulai tuhibbunahum wa la yuhibbunakum wa tu'minuna bil kitabi kullih. So it is you who want to befriend them while they do not want to be friends with you, even though you believe in all the books of God. Wa tu'minuna bil kitabi kullih. So the fact is that they might create this discrimination of believing in one book and leaving out the other. But as far as Muslims are concerned, they tu'minuna bil kitabi kullihi, they believe in all the books of God. And then it is said that it is you who want to befriend them, while they would not like to befriend you, even though you believe in all the books of God. And it is their practice that when they meet you, they say, we already are believers. وَإِذَا لَقُوكُمْ قَالُوا آمَنَّا وَإِذَا خَلَوْا. And when they are alone, they bite their fingertips with rage. Tell them, perish in this rage of yours. God is aware of all your doings, and in reality, God even has knowledge of the secrets of the hearts. So now what is being said here is that these are the people who make you realize, or they tell you that we have professed faith. So this is again a prank that they used to play, and this is something which has been discussed earlier on as well in Surah Baqarah. And what they actually meant was that they believe in their own prophet, and they believe in the last day, and they would say that, well, believing in Prophet Muhammad is something which is totally the task of the Muslims. They are tasked with the belief of the last prophet. As far as they are concerned, they are tasked with the belief of their own prophet, to believe in him. So when they said Qalu Amanna, it doesn't mean that they had professed faith in this new prophet or the last prophet. They would say these words by saying, but we have already believed in our own prophet. So this is something that they would give a wrong impression by using these words. So these simpletons amongst Muslims, they are told that don't be misled by this. And then one thing that viewers you can also catch from here, and a very advanced student of the Quran should concentrate on these words. You see, you can clearly see that these verses cannot address the believers who are true believers, believers who are very close to the Prophet. These verses are addressing the simpletons, because you see, it is they about whom we know that they were the ones who would be very slack in their attitude when they would see that, well, these people have said Amanna, they would believe in them without realizing that they are saying Amanna in a very different connotation. And that is why we have to understand that at times the Quran would not say that it is addressing the weaklings or the weak believers or the simpletons, but the nature of that address will tell us that the ones that are being addressed are not true believers. There is a faction amongst these true believers, because every group has various forms of people. So they are very good and believers, are advanced believers. They are very close to the Prophet. Others who might be in the middle, and then there are still others who are very simple and they are misled, or they are swayed by a wind that might take them to another side. They have this. They are gullible. So all sorts of people were there in the Muslim group as well. So the Quran, we have to understand how the Quran subtly at times directs its attention to a certain group and then, of course, diverts it to another group. So it is here that we can clearly see that it says tuhibbunahum wa la yuhibbunakum. So you see, it was these weak believers who would love to be with the people of the book, and they are being told that look at you, that you love to be with them and you would like to make friends with them, but they don't want to make friends with you. And the fact is that you have the claim, and you are rightly claiming, and you are doing so as well in believing all the books of God. But look at them, that when they meet you, they give you this deception that they have believed. But the meaning of belief that they have in mind is that we have believed in our own Prophet. And then وَإِذَا خَلَوْا عَذُّوا عَلَيْكُمُ الْأَنَامِلَ. Then they are alone, they bite their fingertips in rage, as if they are telling each other that we have done our job. So the Quran has here forthwith on the spot given this comment, and this is a very, again, something that you might note in the Quran, that these parenthetical sentences and these on the spot comments from God, they are immediately like a rebuttal to what has been said previously. And it is here that the Quran says, Kul mutu bi ghayzikum, perish in your own rage. So the Prophet is being told, before even commenting on what is being said in these verses, the Quran has as if it has made its point to first comment on what has been said. So because it was said that they are biting their fingertips with rage, the Quran, instead of saying something which it's going to say right next, the first comment it has made is mutu bi ghayzikum. O Prophet, tell them, you perish in your rage, go die and destroy yourself in your rage. That is how God has given his rejoinder. So, inna Allaha alimun bizati sudur. God is aware of all your doings, and in reality, God even has a knowledge of the hearts. In tamsaskum hasanatun تسؤهم وإن تصبكم سيئة يفرحوا بها وإن تصبروا وتتقوا لا يضركم كيدهم شيئا إن الله بما يعملون محيط. When you are blessed with success, they are aggrieved, and when some calamity befalls you, they rejoice. In tamsaskum hasanatun tasu'hum wa in tusibkum sayyi'atun yafrahu biha. And then it is said, wa in tasbiru wa tattaqu la yadurrukum kaiduhum shay'a. They are not your friends, ignore them, and remember that if you persevere and keep fearing God, none of their schemes will harm you the slightest, because God fully encompasses what they are doing. So once again, these Muslims, these simpletons, these simple in faith, they are being told that look at what they do. When something good befalls you, they become sorrowful and angry that why did something good happen to them? They're aggrieved. But when something bad happens to you, they are very happy. So how can they be your friends? How can they be your confidants? Look at what they are doing. Be more perspicacious. Be more keen in your eye to see how such people behave towards you. So therefore, now you have to persevere. In tasbiru wa tattaqu la yadurrukum kaiduhum shay'a. That if you persevere and if you are people who are not going to be affected by them in this plan, in this scheme that they have plotted, and you show perseverance and you are able to shield yourself, then they are not being able to harm you. Inna Allaha bima ya'maluna muhit. And indeed, God is embracing them from all sides. This again is a topic which the Quran commonly discusses, that these people are not going to be let go off scot-free. God is going to catch them. He is going to take them to account. But remember, there is a time for everything. He has given them respite because there are still some or few noble elements left in them, and God wants them to still contemplate, because maybe they are going to still revert. So this is the maximum time that God would like to give them. But when that maximum time expires, He's going to catch them. He's going to catch them unaware. He's going to catch them when they would be thinking that they have succeeded. So this is a ploy which God has actually evolved as far as His scheme is concerned. So viewers, I'm not going to go any more today. We'll stop here because from the next verse we start off a new topic. We know that the Battle of Uhud that was waged between the Ishmael, the Quraysh, who had actually attacked Medina, and as a result, we found that earlier on the Muslims were on the lower side; they were on the receiving end. Some of the groups amongst the Muslims, they had drawn away. So the story is going to start about the Battle of Uhud in the next verses. Inshallah, we'll take them up in our next session. And now we can take up questions on what we have just studied. And once they are finished, we can also take some general questions.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. That was absolutely fantastic. Akram Bhatti Saab, I can see that you've raised your hand. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Alaikum assalam.
My question is about ayah number 105, if you allow me. It's, ayah number 25. 105 says,
you're saying verse 125?
105. 10.
Oh, okay, 105, yeah.
Yeah, ولا تكونوا كالذين تفرقوا واختلفوا من بعد ما جاءهم البينات أولئك لهم عذاب عظيم. Is Allah Ta'ala referring to the people even now who are split into different sects?
No, it's
That's
not.
The question.
That is, I mean, we have already explained that this is a very specific context. It's referring to the people of the book of the times of the Prophet. And the Ishmaelites, or the followers of the Prophet, they are being told that don't be like these people, to whom when their book came to them, instead of following their book, they split up into factions, and now you can find them split between each other. So this is an advice which is being given to the Ishmaelites, to the people who were newly given this responsibility of delivering the truth, of being the Shuhada al-Nas. So it is specifically about them. But what you can derive from this is that whenever we move away from the guidance of God, whenever we move away from the rope of God, this is what results. So that is like an extended extrapolation, you can say something of a guidance that you can draw, but specifically, because you see the ending part of the verse is وَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. So this azabun azim is not meant for people of today. I mean, because it is meant for people who have deliberately denied, people to whom the Prophet of God was there to deliver the truth, and he was there as a representative of God, as an envoy of God, and in spite of the fact that they were absolutely convinced, they denied. So about them it was said that they will be receiving this great and painful punishment in the hereafter.
I was confused about this, talking about Jews, Christian, or...
So you see, also important in this verse is, it says, not only does it say, I mean, they were addressees of the Prophet, it also says, وَاخْتَلَفُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. Once clear guidance had come to them, even then they denied. So this clear guidance, of course, is referring to the book of God, which had come to them with the Prophet of God, who was explaining this book to them, but they still opted to stay away from that. So it has such a specific context. And then the last words, أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ, they cannot be related to anyone of today. So that is, I would like to stress here that you see, when you are reading the Quran, you must always think that basically the Quran is a saga. It's an account of the prophetic mission in Arabia. And in that prophetic mission, the warnings that were issued, the glad tidings that were given, they are very specific to the people who were there, because they had received a prophet, they are the recipients of the last message of God in a way that none of us is. And so therefore, you cannot extrapolate. Yes, there are certain things that you can extend as an extended guidance and understand them. But if you look deeply, you'll see that they are indicators within the verse which tell us that which part can be extended and which cannot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Dr. Saleem. Dr. Muhammad Asif, you may unmute your mic and ask your question, but please be specific, and one question at a time. We have a long list of people who want to ask questions. Thank you.
Regarding verse 118 till verse 120, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la tattakhizu onwards. As you mentioned, this is specific as per the context with the people of the book of that time, the Ishmaelites. Right. And can we apply it in the present day era, contemporary era? And if it is possible, then how can we ascertain, as Quran says, tuhibbunahum wala yuhibbunakum?
You see, you cannot apply it. You cannot apply it to the current era. This you cannot apply, because you see, this tuhibbunahum wala yuhibbunakum is something which the Almighty is conveying to the Prophet. He is telling them, I mean, we have no means to know whether from inside they have a different personality, and outwardly they are expressing as if they like us or they love us, but inside they have this venom and this rage against us. So remember, this is something which God is communicating to the Prophet, that you think that they are worthy of your love. They are not, because they hate you from inside. So the inside information could have only been communicated by God. So that is precisely why we have to understand that there are so many things in this context which bind the context to these people. You cannot extend them. Today, there are so many people in the book, we just cannot know from inside what they are. So we have to behave with them on their face value, the way they are. Maybe they are intentionally denying, but we have no means to know that. And to my knowledge, I mean, there are very few people who intentionally deny truths, and there are few people. Mostly people are confused. Mostly people are misinformed. They are disinformed. They look at the deeds of the Muslims of today and see how backward they are. So there are other hindrances in their accepting faith. But here you see the difference. Let me explain this a little more. You see, in the prophetic period, what happens is that the Almighty removes any misconceptions. He does not let any misconception go in the heart of the disbelievers. He clarifies everything. That is why you see the word bayinat comes repeatedly in the Quran. So bayinat means clear signs. Even at times it means miracles. So the Almighty makes the truth so clear, and anything which relates to the truth is conveyed by the Almighty Himself to the Prophet. He tells them that, look, now the truth has been conveyed to this group. Now it's no use going after such people. They are destined to be punished. So it is like God having that His own say in that prophetic period. It's like He moving the whole chessboard. It is like he who is controlling everything. It is his envoy who is basically his representative, who is an instrument of justice, his instrument of justice. This is just for the prophetic period. But the problem is that when we extend these protocols for the non-prophetic period or the post-prophetic period, then it is here that everything gets messed up. So do remember that in the prophetic period, the Almighty is communicating directly these facts to His Prophet. Even the Prophet, you see, there are tales in the Prophet which tell you, in the Quran, which tell you that a Prophet is not allowed to leave his people on his own ijtihad. Look what the Prophet Jonah did. He left his people in Nineveh and he ended up in the belly of a fish as punishment. So even the directive of leaving your people is something which God tells you, because you see that migration signals that now the truth has been conveyed to these people and they are now not being worthy to be even lived in. And now you must separate yourself from these people. So it's like God controlling everything in the prophetic period. He is communicating to his messenger because the institution of Wahi is in place. But post-prophetic era is the era in which there is no messenger of God, there is no communication from God. Now things are sort of loosely attached, and there are these loose strings which are always there. But now the Almighty says that whatever is going to happen in the post-prophetic era, it's not that people will go scot-free about them. They'll still be held accountable. The only thing is that in the prophetic era, the accountability took place in this world. In the post-prophetic era, the accountability is going to take place in the next world. The only thing is that people who live in the post-prophetic era must always see what happened in the prophetic era and don't think that no one is going to hold them accountable. Their accountability has just been deferred. It has not been cancelled. It has not been revoked. So if people are not being punished here for their bad deeds, it's not that God has decided to just stay aloof. No, that is something that's still going to happen. So you see, this is of paramount importance that as students of the Quran, as advanced students of the Quran, you do understand the difference between what happens in the prophetic era and what does not happen in the post-prophetic era.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. That was such wisdom. But my question to you, if I may ask, is that as readers of the Quran, just a general reader who just picks up the book and starts reading, is he able to differentiate between what is being directed directly to him and what is in the prophetic era? Or do we need a teacher always? I'm just asking for somebody who's a simpleton and who's reading and who doesn't know.
So I think if you read the Quran with a good translation and in a way that you are able to translate the words properly, it should not happen. Because you see, whenever the word al-kafirun will come or al-mushrikun would come, the proper translation would be these disbelievers, these al-mushrikun, these idolaters. So the people who are standing right there. So if the proper translation and an exact translation is done of the article alif lam, which is of paramount importance, then there is bound to be problem as far as interpretation is concerned. But because of the fact that this alif lam is seldom properly translated, and in the history of the Fasir and translations, it is Ustaz Ghamidi who has he's gone through a lot of pain and he's made a special effort to try to make people understand just through his translation this difference between the prophetic era and the non-prophetic era. In other commentaries, what you can see is that this difference you'll find more in the tafsir part. So the translation would generally be the same. It will not take into account the alif lam, which should have been. So when this happens, so what happens is that the question would arise in the mind of a common person, and it might get resolved if he looks at the tafsir part, and it might not get resolved. So that is why it is essential that such translations in which from the very translation you get to know this difference that they should be read. Otherwise, as you rightly said, that if you just go through these verses the way it is generally translated, or they are generally translated, you'll end up thinking that, well, the Quran would not like us to make friends with disbelievers. The Quran would like us to kill idolaters. The Quran would not like us to let these mushrikun or the people of the book enter the holy Kaaba, as has been said. But again, it had a very particular context, and so on and so forth. It's not just the Quran. There are several ahadith also. For example, in ahadith literature, you'll find it being said that you should not initiate salutations. You should not say salam to disbelievers. Again, this is a special category of disbelievers, not all the disbelievers of today, as is being just explained. So you see, it is basically that translation, if it is not read with the stresses that I was just referring to, yes, it does happen. And I've seen, I mean, look at what has happened actually. If you look at Mullah Umar's interpretation or the way they have understood Osama bin Laden, I've often referred to him because he was not just a warrior, he was also a scholarly warrior. So in 1994, much before the attack on the Twin Towers, he had released a communique and he had cited these verses of the Quran which relate to the prophetic era. He had actually recited verses from Surah Tawbah, and one of the verses was فَقَاتِلُوا أَئِمَّةَ الْكُفْرِ, fight with these disbelievers, these leaders of disbelievers, and he said that our number one enemy is the US, so we are going to take them down. But no one took notice of this, whereas he had said this 7 years before the Twin Tower incident. So you see, that is so important. In today's era, Abu Bakr Baghdadi, he is a champion of the same thought. In Nigeria, you'll find this movement going on. And even today, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, they also professed exactly the same view. And this is cross interpretation by not realizing that the protocols of the prophetic era are specifically for the prophetic era.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. I have a question in the chat. Would you say that these three verses, 113 to 115, are similar to Surah Baqarah's verse 62?
Well, that is just one verse, and verse 62 of Surah Baqarah is actually referring to the fact that if the message of the Prophet has not reached him, and or maybe reached a person in a distorted form, and they still profess faith in the hereafter, they do good deeds, and they have belief in God, then you cannot say that they'll be condemned to hell. Any person who does good deeds, who believes in God and the hereafter, he has a ticket to paradise. But then there's a condition for that the message of the messenger has not reached him maybe, or reached him in a distorted way, or somehow some mishap has occurred. However, these verses are different. You see, these verses are actually telling us that basically people who have professed faith in Prophet Muhammad, how they would conduct themselves in their daily lives. They would offer the tahajjud prayer, they would do righteous deeds, they would outdo one another in doing righteous deeds, they would pray to the Almighty, they would do all those righteous things. So it's like, this is more of a description of the people of the book once they had accepted faith. And that particular verse is a more of a conceptual verse which gives us the criteria of landing in paradise.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. Abdul Rahman, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, sir. With regards to competing with good deeds, sir, during the prophetic era, just like you explained, Prophet or God used to tell who is good or who is bad. But after the post-prophetic era, how can we know? I mean, this is for self-reflection. How can we know that our deeds are getting accepted or getting rejected? I mean, in this race of competing good deeds, how can I know which place do I stand? I cannot know.
We will never be able to know that. You see, to be honest, we can never know that because only God can tell us, and He no longer communicates with us. So all that we can do is try our best, hope for the best, and always keep reviewing our life, because there are things that we might be doing wrong without coming into our own notice. So it's like a phase in which we can never be definitive. But this thought itself is a very, very, I would say, prized thought, that if we have this thought that whether what I'm doing, God is accepting that or not, even thinking on these lines means that you give importance to the will of God. So this in itself is a very commendable thing. So I think the way forward is that we will never be able to know about ourselves, because God has stopped communicating once the institution of prophethood terminated. So now we have to make the best out of it, try not to harm people, try not to in any way infringe on the rights of people or infringe on the rights of the Almighty as best as we can. So it's basically an effort, and that is why it is another form of trial. So in the time of the prophets of God, although you get to know your fate, but the trial is even stern. I mean, look at how the Quran has said that Zulzulu hatta yaqulu Rasul, that such is the nature of trial that they would be shaken and jolted. So their trials were slightly different. They were much more, but then on top of those trials, they were communicated the end result. But today, our trial is also different. So trials can be different, but for us, the trial is that we would never be able to know our fate except when we wake up on the day of judgment. And until then, we have to keep on trying to be as good as possible.
Thank you so much, sir.
Naushad Shafkat, you may unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Dr. I'd like to preface my question with my exceptional brilliance that you have displayed today. I'm just mind-boggling. So my question is that the book is being referred to in these verses, that these idolaters don't believe in this book. But when it was being communicated to them, it was not in the form of a complete revelation. Only parts of it were revealed to them. And especially when in the Meccan period, only parts of the Quran were revealed. So would it be proper to say that they ought to have believed in the book when the book was not before them completely?
So you see, these verses that we are talking about today, they refer not to the idolaters, but to the people of the book. The Jews and the Christians who lived in Medina. So both these surahs, Surah Al Imran and Surah Baqarah, they are Medinan surahs. And the Jews and the Christians, about them the Quran has said that they recognize this Quran and the Prophet the way an estranged son is recognized by his father. Such is their proximity to these books. So it's not that they were in any way unaware of the books. And in fact, the Quran in the very first verse of Surah Baqarah has said, Zalik al-Kitab. And a proper and a precise translation would be that this is the book that you were waiting for. Zalika al-Kitab. That is the book that you had been promised and you were waiting for. So this is must be understood that as far as the people of the book were concerned, they were fully aware that there is a book that is going to come, and more than that, they were waiting for the last prophet. For them, it was just the arrival of the last prophet that they were required to do. Of course, the book was coming with the prophet. It was in tandem with the prophet. So for them, it was just to believe in the prophet, and as the revelation would come, to start and believing in them. And now, as far as the prophet's own nation is concerned, which are the Ishmaelites, so they actually were given this challenge by the Quran, and you can see it being spaced out in the Quran on three occasions, that this is a book that has been revealed by God. فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ إِن كُنتُمْ شُهَدَاءَ. Can you bring a book like this? So to the idolaters, the challenge was that this is a divine book. You will not find any discrepancies in it. It is something which cannot be produced by human beings. And this challenge has been spaced out in the Quran in two or three occasions. In fact, three occasions. So for them, actually, once the Meccan period was over, the Itmam al-Hujjah had taken place. And we also know by the end of the Meccan period, 2/3 of the Quran had already been revealed. So if you look at the bulk of the Quran, you'll find that 2/3 of the Quran had been revealed by the end of the Meccan period. And it was at that end that it was said that now that they have denied the Prophet and his book, that they are liable to punishment. So for them, actually, the Prophet of God stood before the book as well, just as it was for the people of the book. But of course, the book was in tandem, but the book was accompanying the Prophet. So primarily, it was their denial of the Prophet that entailed this punishment. So the book was just conveying on behalf of God that, well, this is my messenger and he's bringing my message. So they did not even look at the book. So they were more interested in denying the messenger by telling him that, well, you are an unlettered person, you don't even know how to read and write, and how can you do so? And when you do so, there must be some jinn, some spirit, because these words that come out of your mouth, they are magical words, they are poetry, and a person like you could not have even thought of, authoring them. So they would debate on these lines. So, it was, and the Quran has also said that they were people who were convinced in their own hearts. So in Surah, I think it's in Surah Anfal or in Surah Tawbah, it says, Shahidina ala anfusihim bil kufr, that they bore witness to their own disbelief. They were totally convinced of the Prophet, and they themselves from their own hearts knew that there was something that they were doing wrong. So it's like this. It's not that a couple of verses or maybe an incomplete Quran was something that they were being asked to profess faith in. It was basically the personality of the Prophet for both these factions. But as I said, in spite of that, a better part of the Quran had been revealed by the end of the Meccan period.
So, by denying the Prophet, they automatically would be denying the book also.
Yes, right? Because you see, what did it mean? The message of the Prophet was to give up their idolatry, give up their deities. So this was the first message, and this is what the Quran is all about. So the monotheistic message of the Quran was something that did not sit well with them, and they were the foremost to deny it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. We have a few minutes left, and I think if no more questions related to Surah Al-Imran right now, may I open the forum for a general question?
Yes, please.
Abdul Rahman, please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Sir, my question with regards to what you said earlier about Abu Bakr Baghdadi and Osama bin Laden. These people were Arabic-speaking people, right? But yet they so misinterpreted such grossly, and it affected the whole world. So how did this happen? Was it because Imam Ghazali changed the mainstream narrative, or these thought that, I mean, like you deferred the post-prophetic era and the prophetic, was it already there, or how did it happen?
Right. So you see, Imam Ghazali is on the other side. So he never spoke of militancy. He never spoke of fighting the disbelievers in this way. So his was the methodology in which even weak narratives, even concocted narratives to bring people closer to religion were, put into place in his own book, which is Ihya Ulumuddin. As far as these people are concerned, see, they are not interpreting religion from their own side. This is the dominant interpretation of a very large part of our own scholarly tradition. So if you look at the Hanafites, you look at the Shafites, you look at the Hanbalites, you look at the Malachites, all of them, they have this inclination, they have this proclivity that as far as Islam is concerned, it is the only religion that has the authority to rule the world. All the rest must be, subservient to Islam. So Mullah Umar, Osama bin Laden, they are just following suit of what their own scholars told them centuries ago. So remember, if you place this whole matter in context, up till 1924, we had the caliphate in place. So remember, it's just a century-old process that has been, initiated a century ago. Otherwise, till 1924, according to our scholars, because of the fact that the caliphate was in place and these wars that they thought should be fought were being either fought or strategies were being made for them. But it was in 1924 when Mustafa Kemal actually annulled the caliphate that this whole issue actually arose. Because now, in the absence of any caliphate, people thought that what is to be done? Because now we don't have a caliphate, now we don't have any country to go to or to organize ourselves. So then, in the space of 2 world wars, we know what happened in World War I, we know what happened in World War II. New Muslim states sprung forth. So with the British withdrawing and with the Ottoman Turks on their side, and of course fighting against them, and then Germany being on their side. So there was a whole plan that was hashed, and by the end of World War II, we had a new scenario in which new countries sprung up. So if you look at the Middle East, that many countries that never existed before that time period, they sprung up. And then people who were born in these countries, they started to think that why is it that we Muslims are always facing the music? Why is it that we are not being able to dominate the West once our caliphate has been dismembered? So from here arose this theme and this thought that, well, in our own fiqh books, it is written that we can fight the disbelievers. We can do that. So now they had a whole philosophy. So remember, it's not Osama bin Laden, it's not Abu Bakr Baghdadi, it's not Mullah Umar, it's not their interpretation. It is the interpretation of the very vast majority of our scholars since the first 3 centuries. It was only that in this 14th century or 12th century period, until the Khilafat existed, that the chance for this seldom arose. Yes, it did arise in some areas, but because the caliphate was there, the thought was that in its presence something will be done. But once the caliphate was dismembered, now it was, so to speak, that Muslims felt high and dry. They felt that they are being left high and dry, and they now need to devise strategies. So if you put this whole matter in context, you'll come to see that basically it is the last 100 years in which what has been done is that people who are of this sort, they have drawn inspiration from what was already written in our fiqh books centuries ago. So they are just implementing what they had inherited.
So basically, you're saying, sir, that instead of referring to the Quran, these people have referred to the already misinterpreted fiqh books.
fiqh books, and those misinterpreted fiqh books are something that we, or in my humble opinion, are misinterpreted, because they don't think these are misinterpretations. They think this is the proper interpretation, and they have a right to kill disbelievers or to fight with them. So you see, these are two narratives of. There is a narrative that has been a dominant narrative in the last 12 centuries, and that is only Islam has the right to rule. All the rest must be subservient. Jizya must be imposed on them. They cannot live independently. And it is this period of lull in which we have to prepare ourselves and then, of course, take over the world. This is the strategy, or this is the overview of our Muslim mindset today. But because of the fact that we are not in a position to do that, so they say that now is the time to prepare ourselves. And once we get prepared, then we will be able to do that. So this is the dominant narrative. What I have presented before you basically is the counter narrative, which is instrumental. I mean, I would say that the person who broke this narrative, or who countered this narrative, was Ustaz Amiruddin Farahi in his own times, who said that, well, you have to understand that this Quran speaks about the prophetic period, and it speaks about the post-prophetic period. It is not by not making this distinction between the prophetic and the post-prophetic period that we are doing the same things which prophets of God were authorized to do. And in this way, we are guilty of playing God. I mean, God was there in the prophetic era, but because of the fact this prophetic era and the post-prophetic era are vastly distinct and different, and by not giving due consideration to this difference, we are doing the same. I mean, we are doing the same activity that was to be done in the prophetic era. So this was the first stone that was thrown by Ustaz Amiruddin Farahi, and subsequent to him, his pupil Ustaz Amin Islahi, and then his pupil, who is our teacher also, Ustaz Javed and Ghamidi. So these three people have made it amply clear that there has been a gross misunderstanding of the Quran by not dividing the Quran into the prophetic and the post-prophetic era, and that is why this whole militancy has resulted.
Thank you so much for the detailed answer.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. We are almost we are out of time, but I have one question left. Do you want me to just take that, or
okay?
Maybe
please go ahead.
Amar Rasool, if you can unmute your mic and ask your question, but please keep it short. We are almost out of time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Very quickly, I want to ask about the ayat which says that where God says to the Prophet that you had almost slipped in your ways. Had we not helped you, you would have been somebody who would have been misguided, and we would have given you double the punishment. But I want to ask you this in context to this story about the satanic verses. Do you believe that could be true? Do you believe that it could be true to some extent, and maybe God is talking about that incident in this particular ayat?
No, certainly not. I think in one of my previous series, I don't remember the name, but I had discussed these satanic verses which are supposed to have found in Surah Najm. We have discussed them in a lot of detail, and I've given the perspective of the other scholars and our own perspective. So if you can just look up that series, because a couple of lectures were dedicated to this whole issue. And as far as what was the other question that you had asked?
The ayat where God says that
yes,
you have almost
that verse. If you look up the tafsir of Ustaz Ghamidi or Ustaz Amin Islahi, you'll find that is not addressed to the Prophet. You see, there is a style in the Quran, and we also use it in our own language, that we have a communication or a purpose to be conveyed to a third party, but we don't directly talk to that third party. We talk to someone else, and our direction of address is towards that person, either because that person is not being worthy of being addressed, or because there is tremendous rage on the part of God for that person, or because God still wants to give that person a chance to rethink and maybe accept what he or she was not accepting. So there are a number of harsh verses which are seemingly addressed to the Prophet, not just this one. I can name even a more sterner verse. For example, look at Surah Abasa wa tawalla an ja'ahumul a'ma wa ma yudrika la'allahu yazzakka. So this is the 80th surah of the Quran. If you read through this, you will start to shudder, because you see, it starts off as if the Almighty is scolding the Prophet, but the fact is that that's not the case. It is as if he is addressing the Prophet, but the purport or the direction of his address is towards the disbelievers. This is also a very subtle style that we adopt. At times we want to reprimand someone, but we would not like to do reprimand that person directly. So we speak to someone else, and our direction of address is towards someone else. We would like to scold people who have given bad company to us, to our children. But instead of addressing them, we address our children and say, why do you go to such people who create such fear and who cause such destruction? So now my harshness is not towards my son, it's actually towards these people. I'm just giving us a very short example. Otherwise, I would like to refer you to Ustaz Hamiduddin Farai's tafsir of Surah Abbas, which is the 80th Surah. He has described this beautiful style, a very subtle style of the Quran in detail, and shown that wherever this harshness of style that you see for the Prophet, it's not actually he being addressed. It is as if he is being addressed, but the direction of address is towards the disbelievers.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Saleem. So this is more like sunana, the word we say in Urdu when we say that.
Exactly.
Sunana.
So sunana is exactly. I mean, you are. You say, in other words, I have some other agenda in mind.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Wonderful session today, Dr. Saleem. Thank you so much. We're all out of time, and we'll inshallah meet everybody next Sunday.